We're live. We're live.
Hey!
It's alive.
It's alive.
Hi, folks. Right. It seems to be working. Becca can hear me-ish. We had problems with. Okay, but we had problems with Becca being able to hear me on her end on Friday, and we've kind of fudged it. Becca's on her laptop instead of her phone this time, so that's why Becca's picture is a little fuzzier. It's a bit like mine because I use my laptop camera as well, and it's getting dark, so I've got a couple of lights pointed at my face, which is a bit intense, but otherwise you wouldn't be able to see. Oh, no, see me as well. So let's see who we've got in the room first. We have Laura of Aquamarine 18. Hello. Naomi Hewitt is here. Christina is here. Tycon's here. Hello. So we've got a few. Susan Garrett's here. Hello. Kristen Louise is here. Long hair, skinny-eyed toes here. Elle's here. Are you back from Glastonbury? Oh, crap. I just realised I forgot to glide Simon back from this morning. In my head, I'd replied, but I haven't, have I?
Yeah, he was coming back a day early, and then Simon was staying an extra night.
Oh, okay. I need to glide Simon back. Tammy Pye is here. Brittany Riley's made it back. Jodie's here. So yeah, and Becca. Oh, because you can see the chat now. That's the good thing about the laptop. See, still echoing. Oh, echoing. I don't think I'm glowing, Christina. I think it's because I've got all the lights on me. And I'm a bit sweaty because it's quite warm and I've had to close the window. Kristen doesn't hear an echo, so I think it depends on your own sound. So yes, hello everybody again for the second attempt at the July edition of the Literary Witches Project, inspired by the book and the Oracle deck of the same name. I mean, you folks in here, I know you all know that. And July's author. July's author was Charlotte P. Gilman, American author, feminist, sociologist, Charlotte P. Gilman. And we were discussing her short story. Yeah, I've got a different version to you, The Yellow Wallpaper. I got The Yellow Wallpaper and Other Stories because I was like, oh, it's really short. I'll just read a whole bunch of other stories. But I didn't read a whole bunch of other stories. I actually finished a bunch of fiction I've been meaning to get on with. So I actually finished some other books rather than stress myself out about the project. So having a short one was really good for last month. Jackie's turned up, and that Terry lady is here. Oh, someone said hi, Simon. Is Simon in? I don't think he's in.
Oh, there he is. Hey up, Doc. What are you doing here?
I forgot you snuck in there and just was like, I didn't see you. Villain Mary is here as well. So we've got a good number of people, nice number of people for a discussion. So yeah, Becca, you picked this one, didn't you? I mean, for those of you who may not have joined this before, we pick at the end of each live chat, we take it in turns to shuffle the deck and pick the next author. So when I say Becca picked this author, she didn't consciously pick it. She shuffled the deck, and this is the card that came up. So seeing as you picked this one, what were your thoughts, just roughly, of this short story?
Well, it was a really interesting read. So it's really an insight into her mental health, but also the lifestyle that she's living and how that is having an effect on her. It's considered, it says, an important early work in feminist literature, and one which explored issues about women's health, both physical and mental. So it's quite an important book in that respect, you know, because I think a lot of times women were, you know, considered like hysterical, or you know, they didn't take it seriously. And for me, this had quite an impact, because my grandmother's mum ended up in a mental institution
Oh, I didn't know that.
And all she had was the baby blues. She'd had a baby that died, a little girl, which died first. And then she got pregnant again very quickly and had my uncle. And she descended very much like this and ended up in a mental institution when all she needed was a little bit of help.
Yeah.
And you know, they ended up doing a lobotomy
On your grandmother?
They did a lobotomy through an obstetrical lobotomy, and she died not long after that of a brain hemorrhage.
Oh my God, Becca, I did not know that. That is horrible.
And so even back then, you know, was like 1948, something like that. They had no concept of the mental health issue that surrounded postnatal depression, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just lock them up, and that's all it was. So, I mean, they told my dad's dad told him that she was so out of it most of the time that she'd got her hand on a door frame and the wind blew and slammed the door frame on her hand and removed the tops of her fingers.
Oof.
And she didn't even flinch. Like nothing had happened. So reading this, and you know, she'd got the baby, hadn't she? She's got a baby, so it was like a very, very similar situation. So yeah, that really had an impact on me.
Wow, so that has a real personal connection for you. I had no idea about all of that. That's really intense and just a horrific experience. I'm so sorry. That's just horrible.
No, I mean it's just one of those things that ignorance of the day, which actually wasn't that long ago when you think about it.
No.
You know, and how
I mean, this story was inspired by Charlotte Gilman's own experience with postnatal depression, which did last about 3 years. I think it was 1884 to about 1887, and she ended up going away for the rest cure. And there was this doctor, and he was quite famous, and she was sent away to him to have this rest cure, and it sort of did more harm than good. And she was told if she wanted to live a normal life and be happy, that she would have to fulfill her womanly duties as a wife and do all the things for being, you know, that a woman has to do, and just to keep herself busied with the home, and to never touch a paintbrush or a pen or anything like that ever again, not to pursue anything creative, not to pursue anything intellectual. So when she came away from the hospital, from that treatment, and got back home, she says in her diaries, she really tried to stick to this advice. But obviously she's a smart woman, she's a creative woman, and it had the opposite effect. And actually she had a nervous breakdown. So on top of having this rest cure at this hospital, she's then come back home and is trying to live this very stymied, small, almost suffocating life, and she just completely crumples underneath that. And this book was, you know, that story is inspired by that experience. So she's really writing about what she knows and talking about that descent into it's weird because you can tell she's losing her grip on reality, but at the same time she's not. It's really interesting. It's just and it has this, it feels very much like gothic horror. You've got the setting of this old estate. You've got the big creepy room, being locked in this room. She's seeing these visions of a woman walking on the grounds. You're so, you know, it gave me this feeling of I don't know if anyone here has seen Crimson Peak, which is a gothic horror. It got really what's the word, they didn't know. Gothic horror is really funny genre. People don't really ever know how to market it, because it's not really horror, it's not really a period drama, it's not really a psychological, you know, it's a gothic drama is this weird mix of stuff all put together, and it got really misconstrued in the and loads of people went to see it expecting a full-on horror, not realizing that it's this beautiful, slow, sweeping, creeping gothic horror, which I am a massive fan of. #gothlife. But don't you think it had that feel about it, that real gothic horror feel to it?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, and I loved that film, by the way. It was freaking awesome.
And the costuming, I mean, I just love Guillermo del Toro. Anyway, it's got my boy what's his chops Doug Jones doing all the creepy people, the ghosts in it. But I wanted to, I've got a bunch of post-it notes as usual with notes written on, but it's interesting, right, because you were talking about your grandmother, and she was obviously in a very different situation, and she's obviously having this experience 50 or 60 years later in the 20th century. Whereas this woman here, this is the late Victorian period, and she is obviously wealthy, fairly wealthy, because she does say at the beginning that they were surprised to be able to get this place because it's quite big, and they're well-to-do but not massively well-to-do. But there's this disbelief in the sickness. Her husband is actually a physician, right? So he's looking after her along with his sister, I believe, who is taking care of the baby. So she's in this privileged position where she has a husband as we say privileged because she's still really suffocated and infantilized by her husband, but she's being able to be taken away to the country air and have someone else take care of the baby, whereas people in other socioeconomic conditions would just have to fucking get on with looking after the baby, right? Like they don't have the someone else take it and, you know, you go rest. So it's weird. I say privilege, but she's also been badly treated. So there's different levels of, you know, but it says here, she's talking about her husband, and she says, John is a physician, and perhaps I would not say it to a living soul, of course, but this is dead paper and a great relief to my mind. Perhaps that is one reason I do not get well faster. You see, he does not believe I am sick. And what can one do if a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives that there is really nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency? What is one to do? So there's this infantilization and also this, oh, don't be silly, there's nothing really wrong, you're just feeling a little low, you know, this not, you know, which is really sad.
It is, and the thing that gets me about it is that although this is set in the 1800s and my grandmother was in like 1948, there really was no difference, no advancement in the treatment.
Yeah, in the care.
Shut them away. Shut them away. Yeah. And you know, my grandfather, they said to him, go on with your life and forget about her.
Oh, what?
That was the advice.
Shit,
just forget about her. Yeah, you know, she's never going to be well. So, you need to get on with your life and leave her.
So do you mean that she was put in an institution and she was there until she died, you mean? So she had the lobotomy and
that was it. Yeah.
I thought you meant she was returned home. So, oh my God, that's terrible. I just wanted to say, Christine Louise says, yeah, I wouldn't really call her privileged. What I mean is her socio-economic status as a wealthy, well-to-do woman. This is the thing. There's different levels of privilege. Like when we talk about white privilege, it's not saying you've necessarily lived a privileged life. It's just saying you actually have never had, you've never been discriminated against because you're white. You have a certain amount of privilege. So it's the same thing. She's wealthy, so she can go to this home, she can rest, which isn't necessarily the best thing for her, as we're saying, which is the rest cure does more harm than good. But she has someone who can take care of the baby. She doesn't have to, you know, worry about that. She's got someone like bringing her food and that kind of thing, whereas someone who is poorer would have to, you know, or in a different socioeconomic situation would, and already has other children, is just going to have to get on, look after the baby, look after the other kids, cook the food, clean the house. They don't have that thing. So I say privilege, but it doesn't mean that she's having a fucking amazing time. It's just this like different, yeah, it's just different levels of things. So
because had she been poor, she would have ended up in the local asylum.
Yeah, like Laura Aquamarine 18 says, at this time, historically, a working class person would not have received medical care because we didn't have the NHS in the Victorian era. So there was, you had to pay for healthcare, and a working class person would either be put in an asylum or in a workhouse or just left to just die on the streets, basically, if they didn't have anyone to care for them in their family that could cope with that. So, yeah, so there's that. As in hysterectomy, yes, hysteria, the wandering room, going back to the Greeks, that term, hysterectomy, hysteria. It's that they believed that the womb would wander about the body and cause all sorts of problems. And yeah, that's where hysterectomy comes from, and the word hysteria. Yeah, so oh, those Greeks, they had some strange ideas. Can you imagine what I mean? Sometimes, don't get me wrong, when I'm on my period, sometimes it does feel like my uterus is trying to claw its way out of my body, but it's not actually doing that. Because my period's so painful. Raven Summer's here, late but present.
Hey.
Okay. So, do you have any like particular bits marked out that you enjoyed?
I wouldn't say that I enjoyed it, because it actually, as I was listening to the book, as I had the audiobook as well as buying the hard copy. Mm-hmm. When I'm listening to an audiobook, I feel like I'm actually there, you know, because your imagination kicks in.
Yeah.
So I think because I'd got almost like a personal connection on that level, I was reading it and seeing her desperation for understanding and some time to do the things that she loved to do.
Mm-hmm.
Without this pressure. She felt constant pressure that she must get well. She mm-hmm. must get well. Mm-hmm. And that it's all her fault. Mm-hmm. And nothing wrong with her, because her husband says there's nothing wrong with her. And one of the things that stands out for me, I think, a lot of the time, she'll say something quite bizarre, and then she'll say, it makes me tired. I will nap, I guess.
Yeah, do you know what? I felt real, like, as someone who suffers with chronic illnesses, invisible illnesses, where people can't outwardly tell that you struggle, that you get exhausted, that you need to nap. I just saying to Becca today, I've had 2 1.5-hour naps today, because some days I literally cannot keep myself, I cannot, like, I'm having to really force myself to try and wake up just before we started to do this live chat, because I'm just like zoned out, I've got brain fog. And there's that, it's your own fault, and you should get better, and there's maybe family members or friends that don't understand why you might have to cancel something, because you just, you know, it's so that I really related to that on that level. But yeah, she's trying to write, she's finding little pockets of time when she's alone to write, and I actually highlighted it. She says, I did write for a while in spite of them, because they don't want her writing, because that's naughty and will overstress her brain because poor little woman brain can't cope with reading and writing. And she says, yeah, I did write for a while in spite of them, but it does exhaust me a good deal, having to be sly about it or else meet with heavy oppositions. They would like sort of tell her off. And sometimes she goes a couple of weeks without writing, which is interesting. And she says that as well. And there's another quote here. And she says, John does not know how much I really suffer. He knows there is no reason to suffer, and that satisfies him. Of course, it is only nervousness. It does weigh on me so not to do my duty in any way. So she's like, you know, I'm just sitting, laying around and I'm not doing my duty as a wife. I'm meant to be such a help to John, such a real rest and comfort. And here I am, a comparative burden already, you know, because I think they're quite newly married, the baby, because Charlotte Gilman, she got married and then within a year she'd already had the baby. So I think she's sort of quite young and newly married as in this story as well. So, and she's also a bit bitter about the sister-in-law, isn't she? She's like, she is perfect and an enthusiastic housekeeper and hopes for no better profession, as in this, you know, this, she's just absolutely perfect. And she's absolutely happy to slip into this role as this housekeeper and looking after the child, and she's suited to it. And that's fine. Some people choose to be stay-at-home mums and they want to look after their kids and homeschool, and that's absolutely fine. It's valid. It's when you are forced to do it, which this person, and obviously Charlotte, found being a parent really not her bag. She never really wanted to get married and she never really wanted to have kids, but back in that day that's really tricky not to do, right?
I think given the chance, she probably would have bonded with her baby, but she's got this relative who, like, she sees as perfect, which makes her more inadequate. And you know, lack of real sympathy and understanding is something that really stands out to me. And also that most of her days are spent stripping the wallpaper off the walls. Because there's one point when her husband comes in and actually says to her, like, what the hell are you doing? And it seems that she's stripped the wallpaper off as far as she can reach, all over the room, bit by bit, every single day. And she talks one bit, and I can't find it because I did have a marker in it, but she talks about sliding along the wall.
Someone else said that as well, I think.
So it's almost it's almost, you know, that expression, climbing the walls. That really stood out as well for me. She was literally climbing and clawing at those walls. Sorry, my battery's just about to run out and I've unplugged the thingy.
Naomi Hewitt says, I found when she spoke about the skirting board that she had at times been crawling around the edge of the room. Yeah, she's basically making the rounds, crawling, it's smearing and smudging. And then at a later point she's going, that wallpaper's all smudged. That I wonder what people were doing here before to make that all smudged, not realizing that was her doing that. Like, she's also becoming dissociated from her own, like, actions. She's like having this sort of outer experience.
It's also staining her clothes. Did you feel that bit, that she's getting it on her clothes? So it's everywhere, you know. So goodness knows what she must have looked like. But you know, she needed to be out of that room. She needed to be walking in the garden. She needed somebody to say to her, you know, it's okay. I understand, you know, I know that what is happening to you is tough, and I'm going to help you get over it, rather than this constant thing like, you know, what are you doing? It makes her feel more crazy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because now we know a lot more about issues like so we still have a long way to go, but it is getting better, sort of talking about mental health issues. And Kristen Louise says the whole "you have nothing to be sad about" argument, and you can't argue with that, but actually now you can. So with things like depression, like I suffer with depression and anxiety, and people I've had, like, you know, my mum sort of trying to be sort of, oh, but so many people have it worse off than you, or oh, you have no real reason to be sad. And it's a bit like saying to someone, oh, there's no reason why you have breast cancer, or there's no reason why you should have diabetes, like, or be born with some kind of condition, because sometimes it's a matter of just genetics or what's going on with your body. So because your brain isn't necessarily making enough serotonin, that's why you have SSRIs, right? So help your body create more. So you might not necessarily have any reason to feel sad. Being sad can be a reason you slip into depression, but sometimes you can just get into a depression purely because your brain is not producing enough of the right chemicals to keep your mood elevated to a normal amount and help you function. So yeah, you just go, well, my brain isn't producing enough serotonin, just like some people might have to take insulin, right? So to me, it's we need to really, like, people talk about mental health and physical health, but your brain is literally a part of your body, so it's still all physical health. Your brain is an organ. And I get a bit, we talk about mental health, but they are one and the same.
And when you think, so here we are in 2020, and there is still a stigma attached to talking about your mental health.
Yeah, which is why I continue to just talk about it and just, you know, try and be open about it, because, and that is getting better, because we need to just keep that conversation going and realizing all sorts of people have all sorts of issues, and it's not, and we also need to get more comfortable with not just, oh, you've got depression or you've got anxiety or OCD or you have ADHD. We need to get more comfortable with the ones with illnesses that people feel a little less comfortable with. So things like, you know, bipolar disorder and dissociative disorders and things like that, where people have psychotic breaks, and we need to get more comfortable and understanding of the sometimes more severe and more complicated issues as well. It's no good just going, oh, being nice about depression and nothing else.
They actually diagnosed my grandma with schizophrenia.
Oh wow. And it's actually,
she hadn't got schizophrenia. I mean, that was you know, we've had somebody kind of diagnose, you know, like distance diagnosing, and it was definitely postnatal depression. She didn't have schizophrenia. She didn't need electric convulsive therapy. She didn't need lobotomy. What she needed was someone to take over for a while, take that pressure off, and maybe, you know, some medication, some SSRI, in order to get that back up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what she needed. That's what she needed. Yeah.
It's Brittany's made a really good point about towards the end of the story, but we're still sort of partway through, so I'm going to come back to that later, Brittany. That's a really good point. But she talked about feeling really lazy, how I'm awfully lazy, and that I lie down ever so much relatable for like feeling this guilt as a chronic illness sufferer, of like feeling like a useless lump sometimes. And there's this, her husband just treats her like a child, and I find it so frustrating. She says, "Dear John gathered me up in his arms and just carried me upstairs and laid me on the bed and sat by me and read till it tired my head. And he said I was his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must take care of myself for his sake and keep well." So he's treating her like a child, but then he's also like putting this guilt on her, like you were saying. And then he says to her, she wakes up and he says, "What is it, little girl?" And it's like, oh my God, he's literally calling her a little girl, a grown-ass woman that has had a child, and he's married his wife, and he's calling her a little girl. And I was just like, what? Like, just fucking gross, quite frankly.
Yeah.
Bless her little heart, he said, and gave her a big hug.
Yeah, it's belittling. It's
Yeah.
and it reminded me also a little bit of this tendency with you don't see it so much now, but people with Down syndrome, very often you'd see the women dressed like little girls with ankle socks.
Yeah.
You know, now it's very different. A friend of ours has got a daughter with Down syndrome, and she has pushed her all the way. You know, independence. So you often saw that kind of not allowing them the dignity that they deserved of being treated as the adult that they were. You know.
Yeah, Raven song, to him, I'm sure it's a term of endearment. It might be, but it's not. It's still infantilizing her, and it's not appropriate to call a grown-ass woman, who, especially one that is unwell and sort of is being, he's literally treating her like a child as well, and he's calling her a child. I find it really like icky, like, you know. There's, where is it here? She says, she talks about the moon shining in. She talks about the way the color of the yellow changes. So the sunlight and the way it beams in on this yellow, and then at night the moon shines in the window and the color changes. And she says, at night, in any kind of light, in twilight, candlelight, lamplight, and worst of all by moonlight, it becomes bars. And she's talking about the wallpaper, the outside pattern, I mean, and the woman behind it is as plain as can be. So she starts to see at night in the moonlight, she sees this wallpaper as prison bars. She's trapped in this room.
There were bars on the windows, and she said that she thought it was because it was a nursery previously.
Yeah.
And should I mention that bit about the movie that I watched?
Yes, that was good. I was telling you, yeah.
There is actually a movie on YouTube, The Yellow Wallpaper. You can actually, you know, view the whole thing, but you get part way through the story in the movie, and then the sister-in-law, or whatever she is, I think she's a sister-in-law, comes downstairs, and she's actually in an institution. It is a country mansion. It is a home for the mentally ill. That's why she's confined to that room all the time. That's why there's bars on the windows. So I was quite taken aback when I saw that. I thought,
yeah, it makes it seem like she's actually more sort of confused, and yeah, she's in a worse condition than you might originally think that she is. And it also reminds me of a certain episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I won't say any more than that for anyone who still wants to watch it more than 20 years later, because I can't believe they pulled that one on us. But yeah, there's still that episode which leaves things, still casts questions over the entire series. But yeah, she talks about how they sort of tell her not to worry about the wallpaper, her husband and her sister-in-law, and she finds Jenny, the sister-in-law, at one point standing in the room looking at the wallpaper, and she says, I caught Jenny with her hand on it once. She didn't know I was in the room, and when I asked her in a very quiet, with the most restrained manner possible, what she was doing with the paper, she turned around as if she'd been caught stealing and looked quite angry and asked me why I should frighten her so. But you can see she's trying to make herself small. She's saying, I said it very quietly and in a way as innocent as I could possibly, because she doesn't want to arouse any suspicions of her sister-in-law or of her husband. She's finding this small pleasure in, as she starts to peel the wallpaper away each day. She says that she starts to eat better, and she starts to look forward to it. She says, life is very much more exciting now than it used to be. You see, I have something more to expect, to look forward to watch. I really do eat better, and I'm more quiet than I was. So she's like turning really in on herself and really starting to get lost in this wallpaper. And she talks about being able to see the wallpaper undulate and move because there's this woman underneath it, so the wallpaper ripples. She get this real like horrific horror movie effect of like the wallpaper rippling and buckling and being pushed out on. It's just, oh, it's so deliciously creepy but also so disturbing and upsetting at the same time. So
you said about the, you know, she doesn't want to bring suspicion, because so she has to be very, very quiet because she doesn't want to act mad. But it shows you when Jenny says, "Why would you frighten me so?" that Jenny's actually scared of her.
Yeah, and she's probably also unnerved by the wallpaper as well. I think she finds the wallpaper unnerving, or what she's done to the what this woman's done to the wallpaper.
She mentions a little bit towards the end of the book. John says, "If I don't pick up faster, he shall send me to Weir Mitchell in the fall, but I don't want to go there at all. I had a friend who was in his hands once, and she says he is just like John, my brother, only more so."
Oh God, yes. She doesn't want to get sent away, right?
Yeah. Well,
she really
doesn't want to get. Yeah.
There's this one little bit that I highlighted because I just thought it was scrumptious, just the way it's written. She says, "Now we have had a week of fog and rain, and whether the windows are open or not, the smell is here. It creeps all over the house. I find it hovering in the dining room, skulking in the parlor, hiding in the hall, lying in wait for me on the stairs." I just love the idea of this odor, this like malodor, sort of this miasma, or like this cloud sort of wandering and wafting about the house, following her and lying in wait for her. Just thought that was a really nice description of this weird smell.
And she's wishing here as well, when she's talking about that woman that's creeping, she says, "And it's like the woman stooping down and creeping behind the pattern. I don't like it a bit. I wonder, I begin to think, I wish John would take me away from her. It is so hard to talk with John about my case because he is so wise and because he loves me. But I tried it last night." So she's constantly trying to talk to him and, almost pleading with him to get her out of that room.
Yeah, and he's just being very dismissive.
It's driving her bonkers.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, I'm sure plenty of women I have a personal experience. I have plenty of friends and family who have as well, where you go for maybe a certain kind of health condition, especially if it's, related to women's health, and you have to really advocate for yourself, especially if it's a male doctor. And you have to, they could be quite, I've been so patronized about things that I should know about my own body because I've lived in it my whole life, from male doctors going, "Oh, well, I'm sure." And it's like, no, it's this and this, and you need to do this. You have to like really push even now to like advocate for yourself for your health as a woman. It's still an issue. But yeah, she talks about how the smell, she's becomes used to it, and the only thing I can think of that it is like is the color of the paper, a yellow smell. She's describing this odor now as yellow. And she talks about this woman, and she says, I think it's when she first discovers the woman actually behind the paper, or first thinks she sees this woman, and it's so creepy. She says, "I really have discovered something at last. Through watching so much at night when it changes so, I have finally found out. The front pattern does move, and no wonder. The woman behind shakes it. Sometimes I think there are a great many women behind, and sometimes only one, and she crawls around fast, and her crawling shakes it all over. Then in the very bright spots, she keeps still, and in the very shady spots, she just takes hold of the bars and shakes them hard, and she is all the time trying to climb through, but nobody could climb through that pattern. It strangles so. I think that it is why it has so many heads, i.e. the pattern has so many heads. They get through, And then the pattern strangles them off and turns them upside down and makes their eyes white. If those heads were covered or taken off, it would not be half so bad. Talking about the pattern of the wallpaper. So she's really like yeah, it's really like imagining these women, loads of these women. It's almost like she's imagining how many women have been through this experience of being belittled and locked away and trapped, and how they get stuck behind these bars, and how many of them have tried to get out and gotten stuck and failed and are now stuck in this prison. It's like, oof, it's intense.
It is. And there's the bit, I don't know whether I'm jumping too far ahead, but when she locks the door from the inside and throws the key out of the window because she's determined to finish the job with the paper, and she doesn't want anybody coming in and disturbing her. And she tried to move the bed, but the bed is nailed to the floor. And at one point, she gets so frustrated with the bed that she actually bites. She's gnawing at the bedstead with her teeth, and she says, she tried to get me out of the room. It was so patent, but I said it was quiet and empty and clean now that I believed I could lie down again and sleep all I could, and not to wake me for dinner. I would fall when I woke. Now she's gone, and the servants are gone, and the things are gone, and there is nothing left but the great bedstead nailed down with a canvas mattress. And, you know, the patronizing way then when John comes to the door and, you know, tries to persuade her, you know, give me the key. And she says in a very quiet voice, which actually made me smile. Where is it? He says, open the door, my darling. And she says, I can't. The key is down the front door under the plantain leaf. So she's doing it very, very quietly. But, you know, the whole scenario is bizarre at that point for her, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really interesting. She does start to also she starts to turn on her husband, because she's like, oh, he's so wise and he's so smart and he only cares about me and I just want to get better for him. And then, you know, towards the end of the story, she says he asked me all sorts of questions too and pretended to be very loving and kind, as if I couldn't see through him. So she's really starting to turn on him. And actually, we don't know initially that she's the one gnawing on the bedpost, or that she's the one that smeared the wallpaper, because she says how those children, because obviously it used to be a nursery, how those children did tear about here. The bedstead is fairly gnawed. And then the next page we find out that she's the one that gnawed the damn bedpost, you know, like it's mad. But she says, I'm getting angry enough to do something desperate. To jump out of the window would be an admirable exercise, but the bars are too strong even to try. So she wants to like just throw herself out of the window. She's absolutely at her wit's end. It's just, I think she says, and then at the end of the story, you realize she's the one that's been crawling on her hands and knees around the perimeter of the room and smudging the wallpaper, and she's the one that's been gnawing in the beds on the bedstead. She says, but here, because she's locked the door of the room, she's in the room on her own, she says, but here I can creep smoothly on the floor, and my shoulder just fits in that long smooch around the wall so that I cannot lose my way. Oh my goodness, it's just so creepy. And you're like, wow, crap, but that's her doing that. I'm going to go through the comments because we've got a massive backlog. I haven't done my usual stop and read, so there's quite a bit to get through. There's me talking about someone talking about Crimson Peak, so that's going way back half an hour ago. I'm just going to pull out. Oh, you can see the comments as well.
I can. I was reading a little back. Claire was mentioning there was a conversation about medication. Did they have medication? and it was the only medication they had was laudanum, which is an opiate, highly addictive, and no use at all, really, apart from just quietening them down. And then Christina is sorry.
No, go on. You go.
I was going to say that Christina Louise, my husband treats me like a child at times. He monitors me eating constantly. Christina, that is not healthy.
Yeah,
not a healthy.
Unless that is like something that you've consented to, like between you, and that's like a thing that you do, that's fine. But if it's something that makes you uncomfortable, that's definitely an issue. Laura says it felt like while she was clearly declining, the woman in the story, she was also trying to subvert her husband constantly. So she was trying to maintain a tiny bit of autonomy, little bit of independence for herself, just carving out that little space for herself to write and to pick at the wallpaper. And she also talks about seeing a woman out in the gardens, walking amongst the gardens, doesn't she?
Yeah.
She sees her out the window, which is kind of creepy. Spooky. Let's see what else we've got here. Brittany Riley says, I considered the wallpaper as the lining between the truth of her progressive mental illness, and that Brittany also says symbolic for what others were allowed to see by her own choice, as well as what they allowed themselves to see. When the wallpaper came down, that is when the family saw the truth of her illness. That's like a really amazing point. Yeah, like it's like the shields are down, that's it, you know, she's completely almost fallen under this illness, she's been taken by it.
And Aquamarine says that infantilization is bound up with loss of rights too. She's not mature enough to make her own choices, etc.
Yeah, so she's being treated like a kid. And the thing is, if you gave her some bloody responsibility and gave her a bit of respect and treated her like an adult that just needs some, you know, that needs some sort of medical help, you know, you're empowering her. Brittany also says there was so much in her life going unseen. She's the character in the book says, I don't want them to see the truth of the wallpaper. I am determined to be the only one to know the truth of the wallpaper. It's like her own little secret, her own little private sort of thing, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's really, it's really sad that she's coping with it all in private, but they're seeing the results.
She's suffering in silence because they expect her to behave a certain way and they want her to be quiet and mustn't excite herself and she mustn't exert herself, when actually, you know, she's locking it all in when really she needs someone to talk to, she needs some form of expression, she needs some things to keep her busy, some things to keep her creatively engaged. That's going to start building her confidence, you know. So
you've gone, we've lost you. I can't hear you. Your voice, you've gone quiet. Your microphone just like cut out. Yeah. Is it only, hang on a minute. I'm just asking if they can hear me. Can you still hear me? It's muted. It's back. So you can hear me. You sound fine. It's just you. So I don't know.
Okay, can you hear me now?
That's it. Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. What happened was my internet cut out, and then it lost it automatically unmuted me. It also lost the connection with my mic, but because the internet was slowly coming back on, it wasn't allowing me to unmute for ages. But yeah, so that was what happened. Sorry. So yeah, now it's back on. So it unmuted itself. It muted itself, and I managed to unmute it eventually. So yeah, I was just going through the live chat. Naomi made a point earlier that mental illness can cause physical illness and vice versa. That's what I mean, though, because the brain is an organ, so of course it's going to affect the rest of your body, and you know, the hormones and the chemicals your brain creates. Like, for example, I have anxiety disorder, and I also have a couple of chronic illnesses that are exacerbated by stress and anxiety. I have a high level anxiety, it can push me into a flare up from chronic illnesses. It's one of the biggest triggers. So I have to meditate and do yoga and journal and use tarot and do all these things that I do to like keep myself as, it doesn't always work because I'm always ranting about something, right? But I try to keep on top of it as best I can. We've got someone talking about Shirley Jackson. Yeah, it has like an early like a Shirley Jackson feel. Someone was mentioning The Haunting of Hill House, which was, yes, another beautifully gothic, modern gothic horror. On Netflix, the adaptation of Shirley Jackson's film. Shirley Jackson is one of the authors in this. I'm hoping she pops up. Let's see. Mew, 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 mew.
It would be really nice for her to be able to, she wants to do her writing, and she loves, you know, she's constantly looking out of the window through the bars at the garden.
Yeah, like what torture is that?
Yeah, what she needs is a chair in the garden with her writing material, and
yeah, a little desk.
Yeah, nice pot of tea.
Yeah, she needs some, like, never underestimate a pot of tea and someone to talk to, and you know, so. But Val's here, and a Crohn's Intuition made it here as well. So good to see you as well. So should we talk about the item cards that we have each picked for this story and for Charlotte Gilman?
Okay. Well, I picked the house because obvious, yeah. The second one I picked were the wild flowers because that is, you know, she's staring out of the window. She refers to the garden as being delicious in the beginning of the book. But I also picked the mushrooms because she mentions that the musty smell and like the fungus growing out of the paper. So that also came to me as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I didn't pick the mushrooms or the flowers, but I did pick the ghost because I thought of this ghost of this woman behind the wallpaper and also walking in the garden, but she only walks in the garden at night. So how spooky is that? I've got goosebumps just thinking about it. It's so creepy and spooky. I love it. Oh my god, it's like almost Halloween. Okay, it's not almost, but it's kind of almost Halloween. Can we just have autumn already? I'm over summer. I was over summer like 2 months ago.
Yeah, oh, I'm not a summer fan.
I also picked, speaking of walking around at night, I also picked the moon because she talks about how the wallpaper is its worst in the moonlight. So I picked that one as well. And then the final one I picked was actually Elixir with this little ghosty. Look how cute this little ghosty is coming out of the glass.
Yeah.
Because her husband keeps giving her these. She talks about him giving her tinctures and elixirs and things to drink. I don't know, like fortifying tinctures. I don't know. So that made me think of that. He's just going, just drink it, you know, like goodness knows what he was bloody giving her. But yeah, I love how open these to interpretation these item cards are, you know.
Yeah.
So I was gonna say, any final thoughts about the story or about Charlotte Gilman herself?
Wow, she, you know, she went through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she did, and managed to create a bit of a masterpiece. Well, not a bit of a masterpiece, a definite masterpiece, despite everything. She managed to put her feelings and get her story out there, you know, and we're reading about it. And
the interesting thing is, like, although she did write fiction, she only wrote a small amount of fiction compared to the amount of other writing that she did. She was very, very prolific, and she wouldn't necessarily have classed herself as an author. She was very much a feminist, a socialist. She got involved in a number of different movements. She was also, as I brought up in her biography video that I made, also incredibly problematic when it came to race. So even though she was this, you know, in this very early stages of feminism and talking about, you know, this, you know, suffragists and the suffragettes, you know, those women were very much practicing white feminism and very much feminism for middle to upper class ladies. They were not that bothered about, generally as a rule, bothered about the working class women. Charlotte P. Gilman was different in that sense. She did care about working class women because of the way that she'd grown up, having quite an itinerant lifestyle and being abandoned by her father and having to rely on family and being quite poor, considering she had such a well-to-do family and family name. But yeah, she had a lot of hideous and abhorrent views. She was incredibly xenophobic, and obviously living in New York towards the sort of second part of her life, where there was a lot of immigration, she was very, very sort of horrible about Italians and Jewish people, Black people, and obviously up the very early 20th century, Jewish people, Italian people, other people from the Mediterranean parts of mainland Europe were still considered as people of color. And it wasn't until, you know, people from disparate working class backgrounds, immigrant backgrounds, started to band together, where the ruling classes were like, oh, hang on, we can't have all of these Italians and Irish and Black people banding together and uniting in their similarities and fighting the fight for the common person. So what they started to do was they said, well, then Jewish people are obviously white and Italians are obviously white, right? So then they sort of brought them in under the banner of white. And there's a lot of interesting reading that can be done about the idea of race and how that was actually kind of an invention, and like it's all just to do with ruling classes. But yeah, so Charlotte P. Gilman very much fell under that kind of spell and under that category, and it for me is definitely a blot on all of the amazing work she did. But again, people are always problematic, right?
She was kind of, though, a product of the time, though, wasn't she? Because
I don't,
coming from her, you know, her background of privilege, she was a white privileged woman, so for her, probably the concept of amalgamating and just being alongside other humans, and, you know, without how much melatonin they got in their skin, wouldn't have been a concept that she'd been never put to her, kind of.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, she was an abolitionist. Her family were actually on her dad's side were quite important, were quite famous, like, abolitionists. But she had these horrible views about seeing immigrants, and including Black people, but all immigrants in a way, as sort of, so the thing that I found really ironic was that she talks about the original British stock of colonial America are sullying and watering down their blood with having all these different waves of immigrants from other parts of Europe. I'm like, you've literally just shown your own arse there, because you said British colonial, so you're already saying, and then she talks about our country and our blood, and I'm like, hang on, sorry, you've used the term colonial and our country in the same sentence, so what the fuck is that about? But I don't really like the product of their time argument, because people use that. I mean, we do have that, the general overall what's the word, like the social consciousness is in a different space. So for example, the comedy and the TV shows we saw in the 70s and 80s, you look back on it, it's heavily problematic by today's standard. Even Friends is so problematic by today's standards. But at the same time is people back then knew things like slavery were bad. People back then knew that it was wrong to treat people of a different skin color or a different religious belief as a different class of citizen was wrong. So I yes, there's a general consensus that people thought that way, but yes, there were also people who were like, this is bullshit, what are we doing, like this can't be right. So I know what you mean, but also I always get a little bit like but still there were people going, no, we need to like be inclusive. And there always are people, even now there are still people who are like, you know, will argue about issues that are going on today, and they just can't. It's really difficult. Anyway, I'm getting distracted by
I only kind of threw that out there as a you know, a maybe, you know, but you're right, there were people fighting like crazy to for rights, equal rights for everybody despite color of skin, you know. So it's not an excuse, really. I wasn't giving her an excuse. It was just like an example.
I know you weren't. I know that's just, I mean, it's kind of like it is a bit of that, but also I think sometimes we look to people in the past and give them a bit of a pass, and I think we need to going forward need to examine that a little bit more. But yeah, I knew what you were saying. So I'm just going to say, Brittany says, my issue of her being the product of the time is that it's difficult to see someone with perspective when it comes to mental health inequality of women, but unable to see eugenics is wrong. Exactly. And that was such a massive part of that specific type of socialist and feminist movement. And obviously with the rise of the Nazis, people were like, maybe this isn't actually a good idea. You know, like it just blows my mind. And it's still something that goes on today with regards to people with mental health issues and people of color being more highly affected and being, you know, forced people with learning difficulties or developmental difficulties, and or people of color being more negatively affected when it comes to forced sterilization and stuff like that. I mean, it's still, you know, healthcare, all sorts of things. We have a lot of work to do still, people. Anyway, it's 10 o'clock already. I turn to pick the next order, I think, because you picked Charlotte P.
I did.
So I'm just going to see. Why is my chat not loading? There we go. Yeah, Brittany says she was from Pasadena. She wasn't from Pasadena. She spent some time. She spent 8 years in Pasadena, but she was originally from northeast on the East Coast. But she lived in Pasadena for about 8 years, and I think she went back for a short while because her daughter still lived there when she died. So I'm just going to shuffle these. Yes, it is. But yeah, Pasadena's pretty awesome. Laura's like, I love this part, the suspense of the cards draw. God. Oh my God, one of my favorite authors, was someone popped out and I was like, oh no, why did I not just pick that one? Okay, I'm going to do a riffle. Let's do a riffle. See if I can, this deck's a little bit big for my wee hands, but we'll give it a go.
It is
big. That's what she said. Can't help myself. Right, okay, ready? I'm gonna merp. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, whoa. Who have we got? We've got Alejandra Pizzanic.
Ooh. Ooh.
So let's see what we've got to pick from on her. Let's see. Someone in the group was interested in this one coming up, 89, page 89. So, Phantasma of Silence, Death, and Lilacs.
Oh,
Born to Russian Jewish. Sorry?
I said, oh, good grief.
Oh, okay. Born to Russian Jewish parents in Argentina, Alejandra was educated in both Yiddish and Spanish, but wrote in Spanish. Her poetry of imagistic purity and surrealist influence summons themes of silence, absence, madness, and death again and again. Her own struggle with depression led to an intentional overdose of Secanol at the age of 36. Already idolized by Spanish-speaking writers, her genius deserves a global readership. And then it's got recommended reading. It says start here, and then there's your voice, party, the dream of death, or the sight of poetical bodies. Oh no, so it's poems, I'm afraid, Becca. So no, you're not a massive sorry, thank you, Laura, for doing that. I should have put that in. But it does also mean that it'll be another one that you can dip in and out of. So that should help, right? So let's see. Slim volume, a musical hell, collection of best work, extracting the stone of madness. Let's see what we can find. Okay, shall we, people? Have you found anything?
I'm just gonna have a look.
Okay. See if my computer won't be slow.
Let me get my trustworthy Amazon app up.
Okay.
And okay. The Dream of Death. Let's try that one.
Come on, computer, don't be slow. Come on.
Let me see.
It's so slow. We want the English, obviously. Prosa completa.
Nothing's coming up on there.
I've got Extracting the Stones of Madness, poem of 1962 to 1972. That's come up, and that's one of the collections of best work.
Okay. Is that on? Have you found that on Amazon?
Yeah, I've checked in on Amazon because I know that's what most people will use. I will put the link in. Yeah, that's what I think so too, Laura. They're poem titles. So that's the book. And the thing is, if you pick if we try to read those 1, 2, 3 poems at least, they'll probably be found online.
So are we looking at Extracting the Stone of Madness? Because I've got that on Amazon.
Yeah.
There's also The Last Innocents, The Lost Adventures, but that's not on the reading material, is it?
No.
Ooh, that looks interesting, but it's not on our material. It's like a diary of hers. Can we make exceptions?
Oh, yeah, I saw that as well. And we have to make sure you're getting the English.
Yeah, that's the trouble, because it's different language. But that one, Extracting the Madness, is definitely English. Extracting the Stone of Madness.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's do that one, because that one seems to be the one that's available. Oh, Brittany, is that a part of one of the poems? That's beautiful. Okay, I'm pumped. We haven't had a poet since January when we had Farah Farrokhzad, so this will be cool. But one of the ones that dropped out when I was shuffling was Shirley Jackson, and I was like, oh. That was a dropsies moment. And then I almost just took the one that was just going to be at the bottom of the deck, which would have been Emily Bronte. But that's maybe bit dry and old school. I don't know. So I'm looking forward to some intense poetry from an Argentinian Russian Jewish woman, yeah, who spoke Spanish and Yiddish. Like, how cool is that? Yeah, a lot of people do struggle with poetry. I think the problem is a lot of people see poetry as this very sort of like, feel like there's a barrier to it. And I feel like if you feel like there's a barrier with enjoying poetry, I encourage you to get into fun and silly poetry or poetry for kids. So like Michael Rosen's a really good example of really accessible poetry. The poetry like Roald Dahl's Revolting Rhymes, I used to know those off by heart as a kid. That's poetry, right? I really enjoy Benjamin Zephaniah. He's really accessible poetry. I love the way he writes. He makes it really sort of hands-on and you can feel it. So I think a lot of people think of like the old classics or like the weird, bizarre poets of the 60s and stuff. But poetry is as vast as there is, you know, sci-fi. Like it's its own genre, but you know, there's highbrow like sci-fi, and then there's like gritty sci-fi, and there's spooky sci-fi. You know, like it's its own, or like fiction itself is its own genre in a way. So yeah, Edgar Allan Poe is really easy to read too. Tammy Pie, that's true. The Raven, yeah, The Raven is I used to know that one off by heart as well. That's a brilliant bloody poem. Watch the Simpsons version if you, yeah.
So I think this is going to be intense, isn't it?
It's going to be intense, but because it's poems, you can read it in little chunks. It's not like a continuous narrative. So again, for that hot summer days where your brain's melting out your ears, we've not got an intense story to have to read. So it's another good one to have, I think. So yeah, cool. 13 poems to remember. Okay, I'll look that up, Brittany. I'll just add that one because that's for people to see. Boop. Wow, so it seems like it's going to be an intense bio video for me to make about this woman that sounds like she's had an intense life. So yes, I haven't checked what the date would be for our Friday chat for this month. I should have a look, shouldn't I?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, and I don't know. I can't remember for sure what date we've got booked for Harrow Times because we skipped July because of Glastonbury. I mean, but that's fine. We'll work around that.
It should be Friday the 28th. We've got 1, 2, 3.5 weeks. And it's poetry. So I think as long as we're reading the 3 poems that are listed in the book, and I will post them in underneath the bio video when I make that. And then any others that we read, we can discuss, just like we did with Farah, where we had like, you know, a number of poems we were definitely going to read, and then anything else was extra bonus. So yeah, it can be hard to discuss, I guess, Laura, you're right. But oh, that's strange that the link didn't work. But let me put the name of the book. What was the title of it again? Hang on. Extracting the Stone of Madness.
Yeah.
Extracting the Stone of Madness. That's the collection. On my internet slow, and it's Alejandra.
We all seem to have really got into this discussion. It seems to have really, tonight especially, it seems to have really resonated, because I think a lot of us in the chat, and both Kelly and I, you know, we do this little dance through our life with mental health issues, you know, and that blackness that I get that creeps up from nowhere, you know, and Simon actually explained it really well when his uninvited visitor video that he did.
Yeah, I always refer to it as the black dog. The black dog is nipping at my heels, which I've definitely been feeling the last few weeks. I've been struggling a bit, to be honest, because, you know, pandemic and all sorts going on. It's a lot, right, folks?
Yeah.
So there is an English. It is in English. It's translated by a woman called Juliet. Oh God, what was her name? Bums. Hang on.
Buns, that was her name.
So it's me just where's the bloody book gone? I was trying to find who translated it. It should be in English. Yvette Siegert.
Yeah, because the title I can see on Amazon is all in English, and it, it's definitely an English translation.
Oh, so Brittany, I thought you meant my link didn't work, but you tried to post a link. Yeah, it's only for mods. I don't know if I've got any mods, to be honest. The book, both languages
says it's both languages.
That's awesome. I can polish up on my very, very rusty Spanish. Perfect. So yeah, that is the July live chat for Charlotte P. Gilman, done and dusted. Obviously we're already in August, so I'm going to have to start doing some research about our new author, our new writer, and there's the card for anyone who doesn't have the deck or the book. And so I try to get these up as quickly as possible, but yeah, I will get it up as soon as I can. Obviously it's not going to go up tomorrow, but hopefully I'll have it up by the end of the week. And yeah, keep your eyes open, keep your peepers peeled. And Becca, as always, thank you for letting me hijack your live chat spot again.
It's an absolute pleasure, honestly. It really is. I've thoroughly enjoyed tonight, and I enjoy every night. So yeah, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, me too. This was everyone really. Yeah, you're right. Everyone really did get into this one. So, and because it was a short story, we could really go through the whole story in quite detail. Like my brain is really starting to like.
I know what you might. I know what you're saying. It's okay.
You all know what I mean. So thank you so much to everyone that has joined in the live chat. It has been a joy as always. It's been interesting, and yeah, forward to our next one, and we'll see you at the end of the month for some poetry. Yay. So take care, everyone. Have a great week next week. Stay safe, and yeah, see you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Ciao. I should say ciao.
Ciao. Yeah.
Ciao. Ciao, Bella.
We're still live.